It's time.
Welcome to Date with DANU. In a recent episode, we spoke about pediatric poverty on one of our segments, Naked Truth. After which, I went for an event which was titled Bleed Good, where we got a chance to see an insight to not the problems that we spoke about, but there are so many different levels to it. So as a follow-up and to give you more insight to this topic, today we are going to be speaking about pediatric poverty once again. Welcome to Date with DANU, the Naked Truth. Welcome to the show, and today I have a fabulous panel who have joined me on the show to speak more about it. I have three doctors, one on her way to a doctorate, and me, I just work for NASA. It's just a common thing that we say nowadays. I'm happy to introduce everyone here. From there, we will start Dr. Rashmira, who has been on this show a long time back. And this is on a different topic we are going to be speaking about. Then I have Dr. Roshan Perera. Thank you for being with us on the show. Then I have Dr. Harsha de Silva. And we have Selyna. Thank you so very much for joining us on the show. So to start things off, this word pediat is always been tagged with poverty around it. Let's speak about the common problems that we are facing with today.
So when we talk about pediatric poverty, it's actually a multifaceted problem. Everyone thinks it's just the fact that there is a lack of access or affordable pads around, but it's more than that. Yes, that is a huge component of it as well, but pediatric poverty also encompasses the lack of menstrual hygiene education, the lack of menstrual waste disposal we have in Sri Lanka, the lack of water and sanitation facilities, that infrastructure. So it encompasses a multitude of different problems that we have, and it's affecting a lot of women, not just in Sri Lanka, but also globally. But in Sri Lanka, post-economic crisis, post-COVID, we've definitely seen a huge drop in people's economic abilities, and definitely in the fact that people are now not using any form of actual proper menstrual hygiene product like they were before.
And this is the current status now. We are not talking about just people who may watch this show right now, but this is a very broad subject to every nook and corner of Sri Lanka. In terms of the issues that are faced on an everyday level, can you tell me a few things that you have faced or you would have come across, Doctor?
Yeah, so I just want to sort of move back a bit and look at why this is an issue. I think we need to look at the context. In Sri Lanka, women account for more than 50% of the population, but in terms of their active engagement in the labor force, I mean, it's much less. We have only about 30% of the population in the labor force. So we need to look at what are the barriers, what are the hindrances of women actually getting involved in the labor force. And one of the things is definitely this issue of period poverty is one of the reasons. The thing is that we don't necessarily have the data in terms of this, and that I will come back to that as an issue. So I think we need to look at it in that context of how we can address the different barriers that women face. And I know we look at things like labor laws and other legislative hindrances, socio-cultural barriers, and I think this is one of those socio-cultural barriers that hinder women from participating in the labor force. And in terms of girls, in terms of their access or their attendance really in schools, because if you look at our school enrollment rates, we are very proud because we have more than 90% enrollment rates, but if you look at actual attendance, it's much less. It's not to say that this is the reason why girls don't, but this is definitely one of the
key reasons, yeah,
why women, girl children don't attend school. So I think that for those reasons, I think it's very important that we address this issue.
Especially coming from a community that celebrates attaining age. And we don't have the infrastructure to sort of look beyond that. Dr. Harsha, you were very passionate about this particular topic when you spoke at the event, which was held recently at the VMSCH, where the Celine Foundation sort of brought this into the spotlight, making it not only their project, but it's a project for everyone, so that we can all work towards bleed good. Dr. Harsha, you spoke about the breakdown of the problems that we don't tend to see. We always say, oh, there's a luxury tax on it, or sanitary napkins are just expensive, that's why all this problem is happening. But that is just a broader picture, but you explained it so well, and I think I would like you to just give us an insight to it.
Yeah, I mean, as a father, I can talk about this because I'm involved in the decisions of how money is spent at the home. And, you know, my wife would never tell me what she spends the money on. And I don't ask either. But, you know, there are situations when, you know, money is limited. And how do you spend this money, right? And if food is a priority, you know, what do you spend the money on? I mean, currently poverty is so bad in this country. Numbers suggest 7 million people out of the 20 million, 21 million live in poverty, right? So they can't have 2 proper meals a day. So how do you prioritize? So sometimes what happens is this type of product gets deprioritized and is forgotten about. And you know, how is the young girl, I'm talking from a schoolgirl's perspective at the moment, right? Bring up the issue with the father, if the father is the one who is making the decisions, etc., right? So it's what I call a horizontal inequality, right? Because of the expense, for whatever reason, I'll talk about the taxes, it is only one segment of the people who are affected by it. If the tax is 200%, it doesn't bother you nor me, but it bothers the 3 women here, right? So from a sort of a policy perspective, this is wrong, in that you must have equity, you know, when you tax a product. Now let's look at the tax, because you spoke about it. You know, it's about a 50% tax, I think, right, Roshan, now? And you know, Mangala brought down the tax somewhat, but then with the VAT getting added, it has gone up. So is it appropriate now to have a almost 50% tax on the imported products? Local products, I heard the minister say the other day, is not taxed, but actually that's not true, because the raw material gets taxed heavily. So therefore, the
although
product
it's manufactured here.
Yes, product is taxed, right? So in that context, from a policy point of view, I see multiple issues. One is equity, right? And then the next is how do you ensure that there is access to these products, and we can talk about solutions. So this is a problem that I am trying to sort of bring up, because this is not talked about much. I am a part of the Women's Caucus, and you know, I seem to be one of the very few male MPs, even though out of the 225, we only have about 10 female MPs, and the rest are male. I seem to be
The one with the biggest voice.
not the only one, but very few, because the men must really champion this. This is not a woman's problem. How did we come to being, right? So we can't just wash our hands off and say, look, you know, let them worry about it. It doesn't bother me. How unfair is that? Right?
True. Brilliant. We're going to come back and speak about this project, Bleed Good, that sort of took this conversation off the ground. We'll come back after the break. Do stick around. Welcome back to the show. Now, before we went into the break, I wanted to speak about Bleed Good, this particular project that was launched recently. Now, something that I've seen in the recent past, especially in the more central areas, is the fact that people are willing to talk about this word period openly in conversation. Although it's Colombo, let's say, it was not a topic that people prefer talking about.
It wasn't before.
Yeah, I think our generation sort of changed that. I'm not going to like ask in a different way, but I'm just saying during when y'all were growing up, I'm sure this was not a topic that was spoken in public at all.
Yes, you're right. I mean, it's something that was not really openly talked about. Even now, I mean, though in the urban areas, maybe there are some, in some strata in society, maybe you hear of it. But I think there are many areas where this is still a taboo subject.
Topic.
And there are lots of cultural and social taboos
Stigmas
and
attached to
stigma and discrimination against people who, I mean, women really, in this area. So I think there is still a lot that needs to be done to remove these.
But at least we are taking one step forward in having an event in Colombo, having media and photographers coming to take pictures, where we eventually just spoke about periods. That's the bottom line of that is that. But it
Correct.
was a brilliant concept launched. Tell me about what is Bleed Good.
Yes. So thanks, Danu, for having us again here. Actually, the first show I did was with you was also on the subject, and that's been about 5+ years now. So yes, we are talking about it for a prolonged period. So why Bleed Good? Actually, because with COVID 2020, we saw the fact that our community was faced with exactly those problems that Rashi and Roshan and Harsha were talking about. And so at that time, it was almost like a double trouble situation. So we had to keep the business running. We had to think of new products that can really be scaled, also products that can be made from home. And at the same time, being a social enterprise, we saw that our community was facing this issue significantly. I mean, it's not a nice thing when you have to choose between food and, you know, bleeding in dignity. So my mother was inspired by the issue, and she
And
said,
also Padman.
and also Padman in India. The story of Padman, there was a film about, and she came to us and said, look, let's make a pad. And of course, when my mother says something, we do it. And then I, as the kind of business development head, took a step back and thought, okay, how can we really make this a movement? Because that's where my passion and my talent is, or perhaps as well. So that is when Bleed Good was launched. It was launched in 2020, October. And we thought, okay, how can we not just create a pad, how can we give back? And we came up with the tagline, buy one, gift back. So it started really as a retail product, and then really, I mean, the potential of how much it can be was kind of highlighted. So without just looking at how can we sell something in our retail stores, we looked at, okay, how can we really scale this product up? How can this be exported? And how can proceeds of that revenue really be given back to our society, back to our community across Sri Lanka, in terms of the donations of the pad. So as we started this journey, I mean, even though a woman, even though bleeding since I was 11 years old, the nuances of it, being a privileged woman, I never had to choose, right? So I
Between
think this
food
is
or what, yeah.
exactly. So it's when you start kind of using that privilege to create the solutions that our community needs, is when you have to start unlearning everything you thought you knew. So going in for a donation alone was completely irresponsible. Exactly as Rashi said, you had to couple it with the menstrual hygiene awareness program, because if you didn't use this opportunity to talk about where the period was coming from, how is the reproductive health of a woman actually organ situated, you know, you were being irresponsible, because this pad, if not used properly, could actually lead to bigger infections, even to cervical cancer. So here was an opportunity and also responsibility, an opportunity to give something and use that almost as a carrot to give that education And then at the same time, here was an opportunity to gift the pad, an actual product that was used and needed in the society. So this is how the Bleed Good movement came along. And with the donation, there's the menstrual hygiene awareness, where we collaborate with organizations such as the ARCA initiative and the Family Planning Association. And as this was going along, I saw an amazing opportunity to talk to women about sexual gender-based violence, about child abuse, because the audience was pivoted. They were taking in something that they needed. So this was a good time to also talk about the various other issues that were kind of stopping women from reaching their potential. And the last component of the program is where we work with, again, FPA and the Suvanari program in the Ministry of Health to do reproductive health checks. So to lead women to do their pap smears and all the rest of it. So a very holistic solution that we've piloted in the last 3 years.
Amazing. And it's so nice to see it coming to life. Now I have to ask you, Dr. Harsha, now we have spoken about the essential items of Sri Lanka, and a lot of things got to the list. But this has been a topic that has been spoken about for a long time, and I know that this has even been taken up in the parliament a few times in terms of debate, and every time there's a new minister for women's affairs, this is always brought up. Why can't this fall into that category?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, we've been trying to get some items off the list. For instance, nutritious food for kids. I just saw the president say the other day, look, some 50% of kids below a certain age are malnourished.
Yes.
So we know this, we knew this. UNICEF told us this. The surveys showed this. But yet, we went and whacked a 18% VAT on food, on this type of food. So when you are unable to get the government officials to listen to logic, and then they come back and say, my God, what happened, right? Then perhaps they will change their mind. But this is never going to come to light unless we talk about it. Nobody is doing surveys and finding out, like even Roshan said, it was an estimate. You know, how many girls didn't go to school because of this issue?
Because it was not in the priority list.
It's not in the priority, and nobody was really looking into it, right? Because for whatever reason, this has been a subject not spoken about. And I must at this point mention when Sajid, during the last campaign, started talking about it. I think that's when this country really started talking about it. They called him names and Padman and various things. But now there is a move by the government to try and give some vouchers to school-going kids because they now are beginning to understand, or at least publicly acknowledge, that there is a problem, right? So this, I think, is the responsibility, DANU, of you and me, as much as, like I said earlier, as these three women here.
To create awareness. Definitely. I come from a household dominated by women, including my dogs. So I understand it is a problem, and it has been I have dealt with mood swings, I have dealt with anger, I have dealt with not having the money and also not having the resource when we were in Jaffna. And it's a complete 360 vision I have of this problem, and it's so obvious, like the amount of shame, like even though like how your mom spoke about it, my mom also had to use cloth, not because of the fact that she didn't have the cash, it's just that she didn't know where to buy it in Jaffna. So but the problem is, to dry that cloth, they have to find a nook, a corner where there's nobody seeing.
Exactly.
Yeah, if you can hang an underwear somewhere, I'm sure you can hang this too. Let's get into a break. We'll come back and speak more. Do stick around. This is Aditi. Welcome back to the show. We have to speak about solutions now. We have spoken about problems. Dr. Roshan, I think I have to ask you, what would you say will be the first solution that could sort of create a dent in this big problem?
So I think the first thing is, as we said, you have to create access to the product and access to products that are immediately available, maybe. So I think Harsha also alluded to it in terms of getting it out to maybe girls through, I think the Parliament is trying to work through this voucher system and give vouchers to school kids to be able to access it. So I think initially you have to maybe pilot a project, because maybe you can't access everybody, but at least see how many people can be given the required number. And I think
and the numbers actually,
profession-
you spoke about the numbers,
Yes.
like how many pads you'll need for the whole year on an
Correct.
estimate amount.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean the numbers are not huge by any means, and I'm sure if you work in collaboration with the corporates plus the government, I'm sure this is not something that cannot be done. It's quite doable. So one is actually access, and again I think we talked about taxes, and I think Harsha may talk a little bit more about taxes. But the problem with taxes is then everybody gets a benefit to it. So even people who can afford also end up benefit from the tax, the tax exemptions. So it's better to actually give them maybe the people to identify those who really need this assistance, and then give them either a voucher or a cash transfer, which is where I think the government is trying to move to. But we need to identify the people, and that is, I think, again where the problem is, because we don't have the information.
I personally feel affordable or not, it should not be taxed.
Yeah, we have to get
That
to
is
that. Yeah.
my opinion. It's not a benefit that women have over men. It's just
It's a basic biological process.
yeah.
Isn't it?
So that
Yeah, so
I know
that-
I'm just
And that's where we have to get to.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I mean, I think we can look at that and what are the taxes, and whether taxes. The other thing is whether the taxes are the thing that is prohibiting the access, because there are other things as well. So
Yeah.
one is actually the sanitary napkins themselves and the access to that, but also there are other infrastructure, and I think you referred to that, which also need to be looked at. And so the solution has to be holistic.
yeah.
Exactly.
One is access to the product, but also the access to toilet, infrastructure, and access to water, and also education. So I think when you talk about solutions, I think you need to talk about all of this
all
together.
elements to it. Actually, something that Selyna told me was this problem is not only has one solution. It has how many parties involved in this solution. So it's like a big playground that we have to work with. As a doctor, I'm sure you would have come across so many patients who may have come forward and spoken to you about situations. Tell me about a frequently visited problem that may have come your way multiple times.
So I think when we talk about period poverty and issues you can have with using unhygienic methods, a major issue is reproductive tract infections. A lot of people, because a lot of women don't understand exactly what happens in their systems, what exactly is causing you to have a period. So they come up with a lot of myths, taboos, and there are all these cultural stigmas that have been passed down from generation to generation that they believe. A common complaint we get is vaginal discharges, fungal infections is very, very common, purely because they think it's caused by wearing sometimes a disposable pad, but that's not true. You're not changing your pad as frequently as you should be changing it. The other thing we have to realize when it comes to menstrual hygiene products is it's similar to contraception. It's not a one-fits-all kind of a situation. Everybody has a different need and has to find what suits them best. So whether you use a disposable pad, or whether you use a reusable cloth or a reusable pad, or whether you use reusable underwear, whether you use a menstrual cup or whether it's a tampon, it depends on your circumstances. So a lot of people, like they come for contraceptive counseling, also need menstrual hygiene product counseling, and that's where I think education is so key. You only realize when people come with these complaints and you hear how they've been using these menstrual hygiene products or not using it, you actually understand, oh my God, they don't have any knowledge on the subject as a whole. That basic process of what's happening inside my body, they have no idea about. So I think like we see so many issues because of basic menstrual hygiene practices that are not put into play. So in the same way, I think education is a key part of addressing period poverty, especially the myths and discrimination and taboos and things.
Want to add something to it?
Yeah, no, and I absolutely agree. So even with the reusable pad, one of the biggest things that we face is the drying aspect of it, right? And that is something that we are very kind of cognizant of, especially now using a reusable product like a reusable pad in a plantation sector might not be the best thing if it is not coupled with an extremely strong program to break those cultural stigmas.
Because it's going to be everyone's.
Exactly, and they live in line houses, access to water, the air is quite damp. So that is why the Bleed Good movement, I mean, it's irresponsible of me as a citizen of Sri Lanka here to just try to sell a product. You know, it is so crucial that this movement comes together, because it might seem like a good idea, especially if you're coming from a point of privilege, to just start distributing products without understanding the consumer, without understanding the user. And this is precisely why we have to go into communities. This is why we have piloted it for 3 years. We've done feedback on it, information around it, because there's nothing worse than on your monthly period being uncomfortable because someone's gifted you a reusable pad.
And the solution is the problem now.
Exactly. So this is, I mean, as women and being the ones who bleed, we have to take that extra precaution. I mean, I've seen programs where we just donate a single pad, be it disposable or reusable. What on earth can a woman do with one pad for a period? It's a 4-hour solution. So this is where, I mean, I think the invitation is really to, as a society, and I think it's a beautiful project that the whole country can come together around and say, okay, let's solve this together. You know, without constantly, like you said, looking at the problem, let's start looking at the solution.
Dr. Harsha, as someone who comes from the private sector into the parliament, I want to ask you, do you think the private sector alone can find a solution to this problem? Working with brands that could build up bigger factories here, create opportunities for work, and at the same time find a way to reduce the price at such a low level?
Yes, I believe there is a market solution to this problem. And of course, there are people like Selyna here who's got social enterprises, and they are trying to bring up or rather introduce a reusable pad, etc. But that can also be a market product. I don't agree with you, DANU, when you say remove taxes for everyone. You know, surely, you know, she should pay her tax. But if you go to my electorate in Kotte, go to a place like Bandar Nagapura, you know, I don't know whether you've seen those small houses, right? You know, one perch house, and like, you know, 7 people live in there. They all sleep in this one room, etc., etc. And you know, that's a different problem, right? So this is how I see it. In fact, the reason why the government is trying to introduce a voucher is because we at our Committee in Public Finance invited all civil society groups, UNFPA, all of them, and we had several sessions of brainstorming, and this is something that we came up with there. The idea is to self-select, and you know, the kids who think they need the support can say, look, I would like to get this support from the government. What the government should do is provide the mother or the parents with a cash voucher that would go perhaps through the phone, through a QR code. There are multiple ways of doing it. We don't need to worry exactly how, what the technology is, and then take it to the store and buy what you like to buy. She said there are different types of products depending on the person. And let's say this product is 350 rupees. The voucher is for 250 rupees. You can add 100 rupees and buy what is available for 350. Or you can buy what is available for 250. Now, actually I was talking with some people and my wife said this. She said, Harsha, why don't you add it in the book list that you get in the beginning of the year? And in the book list, there is a little section you tick. You like to get this voucher. And then
So that means it's not a conversation they need to have, it's
Exactly.
Yeah.
it's in the book list. I mean, I thought that was a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
And then it goes to the class teacher, and the class teacher then very privately, because we don't want to give to some people, other people, there might be, we don't want to create a situation in school, in the class, saying, oh, well, look, you are getting the government thing, and so on, right? And then that can go into a central database, which can be done very simply. And then there is a lot of interaction between the state and the citizen now. For instance, for your fertilizer, you will get a cash transfer to your bank account. On your Asrasuma, you will get a cash transfer to your bank account. Like that, you can get a cash transfer to your bank account. And nobody needs to know about it. But the government, I think, is trying to play some politics, I'm sorry, right now, to say, look, we are going to give pads to 800,000 kids, and our budget is like ₹1 billion or something. You can't do that, right? You have to give at least 16 pads per child per month, right? So you can't give 4 pads. That doesn't serve the purpose.
Exactly.
Like she said, what are you going to do with 1 pad? Look at it, right? I mean, right? So you have to have a holistic solution. So we were the Women's Caucus. She was also there last week in Parliament. I came down hard on those people, and I said, I completely disagree with you people. Look at the budget you have. Select the number of kids you can give this to and give it to them. Don't try to give it to 800,000 kids, because you can't do it, because it will be an utter failure, right? And the kids who get it will misuse it, not use it properly, use it in a wrong way, and that will be the end of that project. And nobody will want to use that again, right? So it can even be with respect to reusable pad. So if the parents or the kids are comfortable with that, then they can purchase that. So what I'm saying is, there is a solution in the market, right? It needs some intervention, because we need to support these people through. That's what governments are there to do. That's why we exist, right? Some people can, some people can't. Let the people who can do it. Let the people who can't be supported by the state.
I think there's no better way to explain that, but that's the role of the state. But how can the private sector get involved? And for those who are watching this with budgets in your hand, what you could do, let's speak about when we do come back after the break. Please stay tuned. Welcome back to the show. Speaking about the private sector and how could the private sector sort of work with the government in finding a solution? Selyna, tell me.
Yeah. So one of the key issues is, and I absolutely agree with Dr. Harsha, I think the issue on the taxes, although it might seem the most lowest hanging fruit, I think needs serious study, because one could argue by even imposing, removing tax on locally made product, but imposing tax on imported product, you are perhaps not giving the best product and most affordable product to the public. So leaving that aside, I think one of the biggest issues now is the standards around this. The Sri Lanka Standards Institute must come around to create standards around reusable product. So right now there's only a standard around locally produced disposable pads. So Celine gets away with it because we raised the money to test this internationally. But finally, when we come to the distribution in Sri Lanka, there could be an issue where we don't have the necessary approvals by the NMRA, which is the National Medical Regulatory Authority, correct? That this is not in fact regulated in Sri Lanka. And if I can add to that, neither are private schools. Right? So private schools are, different topic, but just drawing parallels, that there are many services rendered by the private sector that are addressing social issues, addressing kind of the gaps created by a state mechanism which are not regulated. So then the burden and the onus shouldn't fall on the private sector to kind of go out there and try to pitch their product, but the government should say, okay, we want to encourage innovation, we want to encourage Sri Lankan industries to solve these problems, we want to encourage innovation. There's university students dealing with you know, inventions. How can we garner that kind of skill to solve our society's problems? So I think the piece around the accreditation and the regulation is absolutely the role of the state, and one of the biggest challenges, because finally as private sector we have solved an issue, right? We have created product, be it disposable or reusable. But then the role of the state is then to ensure that that product that's going to the public is in fact regulated, so that it doesn't it's not misused. And in an issue like this, where there can be really serious, severe implications on a woman's health, there is a need for NMRA to move really fast. And I would, you know, no point looking at Dr. Harsha here, but
because he's the only one who is here.
I would really urge the government to pick up their socks on that, and I will make sure also that socks are picked up on that. So that is one major key issue that is around, which stops the private sector from really promoting this solution locally. And then the other piece, which I won't get into because I'll leave Rashi and Roshan to look at, is how this all connects back to the health and the education piece. Yeah.
Would you all like to add on that?
So I think, yeah, so adding on from Selyna, the issue we have really is that Sri Lanka standards need to set out standards for all these products. They can't just only have it for disposable pads. And on top of that, the NMRA can only then, once the Sri Lanka standards have these standards, approve other menstrual hygiene products like the reusable pad, for instance. So everyone needs to work together and work fast. This has been ongoing for so many years now. There are solutions coming up all over the place. But because the government is not taking notice and taking this as an important thing to get done fast, it's just stagnant. And how many times are we going to go back and forth on this topic?
Yeah, the next show I do on this is going to be when it's solved.
Exactly.
The last time we came was 5 years ago, right?
Exactly.
And we were speaking about the same thing.
Exactly. And to add to what Rashi is saying, you know, we have this culture where even the government bureaucracy is saying, do not stop asking things from government. Government doesn't have to solve all your problems. Of course it doesn't. But then when there are solutions in the market, then you have to make sure that it is prioritized and promoted, and let's not all talk about a sorry story about how Sri Lanka never solves problems.
True.
You know, so this is such a low-hanging fruit, and actually, DANU, this can be a global example. We are a small country that can collectively solve this issue. So when you promote products that are reusable, from the pad to the cup, there's a significant environmental impact. So the disposable pad, it really is a polluting product. You know, it adds a significant ton of
waste,
the emissions, CO2 emissions into our environment, and reusable options don't. So, I mean, also there are opportunities. You might have read in the paper about ADB approving loans to SMEs, over 100 million USD. Green bonds are coming into the country. This is also where the banking sector can step up and say, hey, we have all this money, bring on the social innovations, let's solve Sri Lanka's problems.
Yeah, and this will grow more entrepreneurs, younger, more interesting and more.
Exactly.
But I would like to take a moment to recognize Dr. Harsha on one of his projects that he launched, the ambulance service that has won an award.
Well, not an award, but the World Bank says it is one of the fastest, most digitally advanced ambulance services in the whole world.
So let's celebrate what Sri Lanka can do and promote that, right?
I've used it twice and I was telling him the experience. Both were not for great things, but yet you can't go into an ambulance and have a party.
Exactly.
But I must say they were just absolutely efficient, and that's the most important thing. Break time, we'll see you after. Welcome back to the show. Our final segment, speaking about Bleed Good and so many other initiatives that have come forward to create awareness about this project. Did want to speak about the medical sector and how they are currently working on this matter.
Yes, so the Health Promotion Bureau, which is a part of the Ministry of Health, has really taken the lead when it comes to menstrual health education, hygiene and waste disposal. And they have signed an MOU with 9 other ministries, including water sanitation, justice, finance, to kind of get the ball rolling on how we can, combat period poverty and ultimately alleviate it. So they really are taking the lead, and they're doing a lot of education sessions, especially for healthcare workers, because they themselves are not updated when it comes to menstrual hygiene and health. So there is little things happening, but of course we need to all work together. The Ministry of Education really needs to come on board to implement menstrual hygiene education for teachers so that they can pass it on to schools as well. And there needs to be more collaboration, not just with the private and government sector, but within the government sector itself.
How much of information are we sharing with a boy child who is in schools, mixed schools, so that they know their counterparts seated next to them or even who are playing with them on the field are going through something every month?
I think for a long time, men have been excluded from the table, and that is one of the main problems we have, because none of them want to take it up now except Dr. Harsha. But now in schools, things are changing. So at the Family Planning Association of Sri Lanka, we are working on a project called the CAP project, the Collective Action Against Period Poverty, which is with the French Embassy in Sri Lanka. And one of the organizations we are working with in the plantation areas is actually looking at pad banks within schools. And for those pad banks, it's actually the male children who are actually raising money, selling little bookmarks and things to buy pads to stock up the pad bank.
Oh, that's amazing.
So there are organizations that we've made it very known that they have to include men at the conversation, boys and men, to understand, because if they're not ever going to have a period, they're never going to understand what a woman goes through or what a girl goes through. And it's important to keep them in the conversation so they get a bit of understanding about it and can advocate for their peers.
This kind of issues. Have to ask this question, this is a bit off the topic, but we have certain archive rules that we still follow, like marital rape is still not recognized. There are so many things on these lines that are like even when it comes to sexual abuse, when it comes to sexual rape, consent or even like anal penetration is not considered rape. There are so many. When would, in 2024, I'm just asking you as a person who is a member of parliament, changing these archive rules and being with what 2024 is and not sticking by what Victoria might have written at one time. Just saying, when do you think we will up our game in that level? I'm speaking to you as a man who thinks modern.
Yeah, I mean, there is an issue with, the Penal Code 364, and, that needs to change. And Sri Lanka as a country has given an undertaking to the international community that these rules will change and homosexuality, for instance, be decriminalized.
But don't you think we always bring in the whole religious element to these rules?
No, yes. I mean, I recall when we tried to change it, I think it would have been 2016 or 17. Mangala had actually initiated it, and that day he had unfortunately he had to leave Sri Lanka, and I was acting minister, and I had to take it to cabinet. We had to get approval in cabinet to take it to the international forum, and I got roasted, because the coalition partners, one shall I call it, people with modern thinking wanted the change. People with the archaic thinking that you referred to didn't want change. And religion, culture, all these things came in, and it is still not done. But now what had happened last week is trying to bring the age of consent of sexual activity to 14 years.
Yeah.
And I think that is ridiculous. How can, sorry, you may have a different view,
Yeah.
right? And you tell a girl that you can give consent at 14. And then
No, it's comical in a country that has no comprehensive sexuality education, because
Exactly.
apparently that was against our Sanskruti. To suddenly bring the age of consent for sex down to 14 is beyond ridiculous.
like she was saying, kids don't know. There is no sex education. And they frown upon that. Like there's no, you don't need to teach them. And then you say 14 years is consent? Nonsense. Totally, I don't know from where, who, for what purpose did this. Now Vijayadasa Rajapaksa is saying he's going to withdraw the amendment. So, okay, withdraw the amendment, make sure that you have, you destigmatize all these topics first.
Yes.
Right? First, let us understand that, what women go through needs to be understood not just by women but by men. Because all decision makers, not all, the absolute majority of decision makers are men. Right? Parliament is 215 men, right? And if they don't understand, they don't talk about, there is total lack of awareness of these matters. You can't even sometimes blame them because they'll say, I didn't know.
Yeah, they didn't know.
I don't understand, right? So it has to change, right? But let us prioritize what needs to be changed. Consent can remain at 16.
And let's solve period
And let's
poverty.
solve this first.
Definitely. Well, on that note, thank you so very much for being here. I really hope this will create conversations within your spaces, in your environment, so that big organizations could come forward and find this middle ground where everyone wins out of it, and we create a safer, cleaner and a more accepting environment for every girl child out there in Sri Lanka. Thank you so very much for being here. Absolutely a pleasure having you all. We will see you soon. Till then, you keep smiling. That's right.